Picture a rugged frontier morning where the sun rises over amber fields and the promise of new beginnings tangles with the dusty reality of the Wild West. Imagine one woman's fate tethered to a rancher. She's never met a man known only by a reputation, grand as the Rockies, and a waistline just as expansive. In this parched land of tumbleweeds and tall tales, secrets are as plentiful as sagebrush, and bonds of blood can be tested by desperation. Welcome to a story of two sisters whose destinies collide on a remote estate where a mail-order bride's refusal triggers a cascade of betrayals, heartbreak, and impossible choices. Harriet Edgewater. A slender young woman of 21 sat at the old mahogany desk in her father's cramped study in Philadelphia, tapping her ink-stained fingers on the polished surface. Winter sunlight slanted through the leaded window, catching the dust motes that danced in the stagnant air. The faint odor of burnt coals and stale tea leaves filled the room. She could hear her mother shuffling around the kitchen, refusing to meet Harriet's eyes. The family's finances had collapsed in the wake of her father's illness, and Harriet knew it was only a matter of time before the final notice came for their small row house. She had answered the ad on a desperate whim, a letter to a rancher out west, who promised security and a new life for a suitable bride. Indeed, Harriet's friend Emma Billings had teased her for being so naive, marriage to a stranger. She might as well hop aboard a pirate ship. But Harriet feared her family's imminent ruin even more than the unknown. The letter she now clutched had arrived that morning, postmarked from Cheyenne, Wyoming territory. Miss Harriet Edgewater, it read in a careful slanted script. I was mighty pleased to read your inquiry. I am Caldwell Beaumont, proprietor of one of the finest ranches in the Wyoming territory. I am seeking a wife of good standing moral character and hearty constitution. My fortune is stable, my ranch is growing, and I can provide you with comfort. I ask that you come out west to meet me at your earliest convenience. Harriet's heart pounded. She had heard that Caldwell Beaumont was a heavy-set man, rumored to be quite robust in both wealth and girth. Some called him Big Caldwell, or the Fat Rancher. But the letter had an elegant warmth and a surprising humility. Nothing like the braggadocious toadishness Harriet had expected. Her father, Edward Edgewater, had said, "It may not be what you've dreamed of, Harriet, but this is your chance to keep this family afloat. We can no longer rely on my pension." He coughed weakly, and Harriet knew that time was short. Despite the stigma of mail-order marriages, Harriet felt a tug of possibility. Perhaps it would be an adventure in the wide-open West, a chance at prosperity. Perhaps Caldwell would turn out to be a kind man, with a good heart, so Harriet took up her pen and wrote back, sealing her fate. Or so she believed. The following fortnight was a blur of hurried preparations. Harriet sold a few trinkets and dresses to cover her train fare. At the station, Lucy Edgewater, Harriet's younger sister, by 2 years, held Harriet's trembling hands. Lucy had large doe eyes and an unyielding optimism, her chestnut hair curling at her shoulders. While Harriet was often quiet and stoic, Lucy had a spirited laugh and a belief that anything could be overcome. "Are you sure about this?" Lucy asked, voice quivering with concern. "A mail-order marriage to a stranger. You barely know him." Harriet forced a smile. "What choice do we have?" Lucy pressed her lips together, tears gathering at the corners of her eyes. Their mother Harriet's friend Emma Billings and her father all stood by, offering last-minute embraces before she boarded. As the train lurched forward, Harriet felt a pang of longing for home and an acute fear of the unknown. Would Caldwell be kind? Would she find love in a harsh frontier? She clung to hope, not knowing that this single decision would unravel more than her future. It would entwine the fate of two sisters in a confrontation of the heart. The journey took nearly 2 weeks. Harriet endured endless rattling train cars, stale biscuits, and the company of strangers heading west in pursuit of gold land or new beginnings. As the rails cut across the plains, she witnessed an oceanic expanse of tall grass mountains looming on distant horizons, and the occasional herd of roaming bison. It was a far cry from her familiar Philadelphia streets. Eventually, she stepped off the train in Cheyenne, a settlement bristling with the energy of opportunity. Cowboys sauntered down wooden sidewalks, their spurs jingling. Miners, ranchers, and merchants wandered the main street, sizing up new arrivals. The raw tang of manure and dust filled her nostrils. Harriet wrinkled her nose at first, but soon accepted it as part of the rough-hewn reality. She was meant to meet Caldwell Beaumont at the station. Her heart pounded as she scanned faces looking for a man fitting the vague description from rumor. Her pulse skipped when she saw a broad-shouldered figure in a weathered duster coat and a wide-brimmed hat. His cheeks were ruddy, and indeed he was a sizable man. She took 2 hesitant steps in his direction, but the stranger turned away, revealing a face that was not at all the one she expected. Disappointment tightened her chest. She waited. Minutes drifted into an hour. When Harriet was nearly convinced she had been abandoned, a short, stout, older man with a bushy moustache approached her. "Pardon, miss," he said politely, tipping his hat. "Are you Miss Harriet Edgewater by any chance?" She nodded, exhaling in relief. "I am, sir." He thrust out a calloused hand. "Name's Bartholomew O'Connell. Caldwell Beaumont's ranch foreman. Mr. Beaumont's in a meeting with the Land Bureau. He asked me to fetch you. I apologize for the delay." They walked to a battered stagecoach with Circle B Ranch painted on the side. Once inside, Harriet tried to quell her nerves. O'Connell was friendly enough, explaining that Caldwell was a busy man, forever dealing with cattle negotiations and property disputes. The conversation drifted to the ranch's success, which according to O'Connell owed much to Caldwell's business acumen and willingness to take risks. Harriet nodded politely, uncertain how to feel about the man who would soon be her husband. When the stagecoach finally pulled up to the ranch, a sprawling vista of rolling pastures dotted with grazing cattle, Harriet couldn't help but be impressed. Wooden corrals, a large barn, and a stately white manor crowned a gentle hill. The winding gravel drive led to a house bigger than any Harriet had seen outside the city. Nervous excitement gripped her as she climbed down, smoothing her dusty skirt. Caldwell stepped out onto the porch. He was indeed a large man, heavier than the average rancher, with a round belly protruding beneath a suspenders and shirt ensemble. A broad hat shadowed his keen blue eyes. But Harriet also noticed the gentleness in his smile and the grace in how he greeted her, taking her hand with unexpected softness. "Miss Edgewater," he said, voice resonating with a rumble. "Welcome to Circle B Ranch. I'm sorry I couldn't be at the station." Harriet swallowed. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Beaumont." He grinned. "Call me Caldwell." She felt a tug of relief. At least he seemed polite. And the ranch, well, it was beautiful, reflecting wealth and stability beyond her imagination. Yet that afternoon, as Caldwell gave her a tour of the land, Harriet found her nerves unraveling in unexpected ways. He led her past the stables and introduced her to a few ranch hands. He explained his operations with paternal pride. Harriet responded with polite interest, her voice subdued. Despite Caldwell's attempt at warmth, Harriet couldn't ignore a gnawing sense of unease. Could she really marry a man so different from herself? They shared no history, no real affection, and she couldn't deny that Caldwell's girth and booming presence unsettled her in ways she didn't fully understand. That night, Harriet settled into the guest room. She lay awake, staring at the moonlit ceiling, hearing the distant lowing of cattle. Tomorrow, Caldwell wanted to discuss wedding arrangements. Harriet's heart pounded with dread. Could she truly do this? The unknown yawned before her like a canyon. She had taken the risk for her family. But was she forging a path to happiness or misery? Early the next morning, Harriet found a note slipped under her door. "Meet me on the porch at sunrise." She dressed in a modest gown, half expecting the jingle of spurs as she headed downstairs. To her surprise, Caldwell waited in a rocking chair, sipping coffee, while the morning sun spilled gold across the hills. He motioned for her to sit beside him. For a moment, they watched the land-awaken ranch hands guiding horses, cooking fires, puffing smoke from the bunkhouse chimney birds, singing in the crisp dawn air. "We built this place up from nothing," Caldwell said quietly. "I came here when I was barely a man, with only a few dollars in my pocket. Now look at it." Harriet nodded. Despite her anxiety, she admired his ambition. "I suppose you know," he continued, turning to look at her with soft eyes, "why I advertised for a wife. This life can be lonely, Harriet. I have everything I need, except a companion, a partner who can help me grow this ranch, someone to share in the joys and sorrows of the frontier." When Harriet didn't reply immediately, Caldwell pressed on. "I'd like to propose we marry in a month's time. The circuit preacher comes through about once every few weeks. We can have a modest ceremony here at the ranch, or if you prefer something simpler, we can do that too." Her heart hammered. She looked at his kindly expression. He was not the monstrous buffoon she had dreaded. But a gnawing voice inside whispered, "You barely know him. You feel no real love." Taking a cautious breath, Harriet said, "Mr. Beaumont Caldwell, this all feels so sudden. I appreciate your kindness, and I'm grateful you're offering me a secure life. But I need more time." A flicker of disappointment crossed his face, but he nodded. "I understand. Take the time you need. Get to know me, the ranch, the people. Decide what you want." He shifted, leaning forward with a worried crease to his brow. "There's something else, Harriet. I'm a straightforward man. I know folks call me the fat rancher, and they may judge me for my size. I hope you can see past that. There's more to me than a big belly." He gave a self-conscious laugh, and Harriet realized he felt vulnerable admitting that. Her chest tightened with sympathy. "I don't judge you for your appearance," Harriet stammered. "It's just this is all new to me. I promise I'll do my best to see your true character." He nodded, forcing a hopeful smile. In the ensuing days, Harriet tried to adjust. She walked the property, chatting with the ranch hands, sharing tea with Caldwell in the parlor, learning about finances, cattle markets, and the unpredictability of frontier weather. She could see Caldwell was respected by his employees, that he treated them decently. He had a booming laugh when he was amused, and he seemed patient with Harriet's apprehensions. Yet as the days passed, Harriet could not banish a sense of foreboding. She felt stifled by the idea of a marriage arranged by necessity. Caldwell might be kind, but Harriet didn't feel the stirrings of romance. At night, she wrote letters to Lucy and her parents, describing the ranch skirting around her own reservations. "He's very generous," Lucy Harriet wrote. He's not an unkind man. Perhaps in time I'll grow to care for him. But oh, how I miss home." A week later, Caldwell gently pressed for an answer about their wedding date. Harriet finally blurted out, "I'm sorry, but I'm not ready." He frowned, the lines around his eyes deepening. "Harriet, I can't wait indefinitely," he said, though gently. "I need to know if you're truly willing to be my wife." In that moment, Harriet panicked. The reality of a loveless union rushed over her. She confessed, tears shimmering. "I'm sorry, Caldwell, but I can't do this. I can't marry you." His face fell with shock, then heartbreak. He stood, abruptly muttered something about taking a ride, and lumbered off, leaving Harriet to wrestle with guilt. She had turned down a man who offered her family salvation, but the sacrifice seemed too great. She retreated to her room, feeling the weight of what she had done. That evening, Harriet sat by the flickering oil lamp in her bedroom. The silhouette of the ranch house corridor stretched before her like a tunnel of doubt. She had barely seen Caldwell since she told him she could not marry him. Embarrassment and regret clung to her like dust from the corral. She pulled out a piece of stationery, tears blurring her vision, and wrote to her sister, "Lucy. Dearest Lucy, I write to you with a heavy heart. This life out here is not what I expected. Caldwell Beaumont. The man who proposed to me is good, in many ways kind, generous, successful. But there is no spark of love in my heart. I couldn't bring myself to accept him, even for the sake of our family's security. I fear I have made a terrible mistake. I am alone in a strange place and feel torn between duty and desire. Please, Lucy, give me your thoughts. Should I try to love this man, despite my doubts, or should I return home, admitting failure? With all my love and confusion. Harriet." She sealed the letter with trembling hands, then handed it to Bartholomew O'Connell to be sent on the next stage out. Bartholomew gave Harriet a gentle pat on the shoulder. "Don't fret, Miss Harriet. Caldwell's upset, sure, but he'll come around. This land has a way of testing a person, but also forging unexpected bonds. Give him a chance. Give yourself a chance, too." But Harriet's mind churned with the possibility of returning home. Did she have the right to turn away Caldwell's proposal when her family was facing ruin? The guilt gnawed. Perhaps if she forced herself to accept, she could learn to care for him. After all, she'd seen arranged marriages survive before. But her own heart bristled at the idea of being shackled to a stranger, no matter how kind. The following day, Harriet tried to speak with Caldwell to apologize for her abrupt refusal. She found him in the barn, brushing down one of his prized horses, a sleek Palomino mare. When he spotted her, his expression shuttered. She stepped forward tentatively. "Caldwell, I'm sorry about the other day. It's just, so much has happened so quickly. I didn't mean to hurt you." He ran a hand over the horse's mane, not meeting her gaze. "I appreciate your honesty," he said stiffly. "I have no wish to force a woman to marry me against her will. I'd hoped you would see the good in our arrangement. But if your heart's not in it, what can I do?" His voice cracked slightly, betraying how deeply her rejection stung. Then, to her surprise, he added, "The ranch house is yours to stay in as long as you like. If you need more time, take it. If you decide to leave, I'll cover your fare home." Tears pricked Harriet's eyes. That generosity only made her feel guiltier. She nodded, unable to speak. Her footsteps echoed on the stable floor as she slipped away. Leaving him in the half-light, his big shoulders slumped. Days passed in uncomfortable silence between them. Harriet took to walking the perimeter of the ranch, trying to still her racing mind. She saw the ranch hands working diligently, all with admiration for Mr. Beaumont. She saw how Caldwell had built a community, not just a business. Meanwhile, she dreaded the letter she would receive back from Lucy. Would Lucy scold her for turning down the lifeline that could save their family's future? At night, Harriet dreamt of home, of Lucy's laughter, of her father's gentle voice. Sometimes she dreamt of Caldwell, too, how his wide arms might feel if she allowed herself to be embraced. The notion made her heart pound with confusion. Could she have feelings for a man who physically wasn't what she imagined, and whom she had rejected so harshly? Then, a week after she posted her letter, a reply arrived. The moment Harriet saw Lucy's elegant handwriting, she tore open the envelope with trembling fingers. "My dear Harriet, I wish I could reach out and hug you right now. You sound so distraught. Mother and father are worried too. But Harriet, you cannot force yourself to love someone. If the idea of this marriage makes you miserable, you mustn't do it unless in your heart you see a possibility of happiness with him someday." Harriet's heart sank as she read further. Lucy mentioned the looming debts, the possibility of losing their home. She had enclosed a second note from their mother, who urged Harriet to consider the marriage carefully, but confessed she and Edward would never want Harriet trapped in a loveless union for their sake alone. Harriet felt tears well. She was torn between love for her family and a future she couldn't yet fathom. But then, Lucy's final paragraph caught Harriet's eye. "If you truly cannot marry Caldwell, I have an odd suggestion. I'm not as timid as you. Perhaps I could journey west and meet him myself. If by chance he's open to it, I might take your place. I know it sounds scandalous, but I'm thinking of our family, Harriet. Let me know if you believe this is possible. With love and faith. Lucy." Harriet stared at the page, her mind spinning. Lucy take her place. It was unthinkable. Or was it? Had Harriet's refusal opened a door for her younger sister, who might find Caldwell more to her liking? It was a wild idea, but Harriet could not deny the flicker of hope it stirred. Within 2 weeks, Lucy Edgewater was stepping off the same train Harriet had taken, her face flushed with excitement and trepidation. Harriet stood on the platform in Cheyenne, scanning the arriving passengers. When she finally spotted Lucy, Harriet's heart twisted. Lucy's expression reflected a mixture of awe at the frontier surroundings and a glimmer of determination that Harriet envied. Harriet rushed forward, embracing her sister in a flurry of laughter and tears. "That was some letter you sent," Harriet whispered after they found a corner of the depot, away from prying ears. Lucy clutched Harriet's hands. "I'm serious about it. If Caldwell is as kind as you've described, maybe I could get to know him. Maybe. The arrangement could work with me instead. And think of the security it could bring to our family." Harriet blinked. "But Lucy, do you realize what that means? You'd be stepping into the role of mail-order bride. Something I've discovered is no trivial matter." Lucy's eyes shone with resolve. "I know, but I'm not afraid of new experiences. Let's at least talk to Caldwell and see what he thinks." The ride to the ranch was a swirl of Lucy's excited chatter. She marveled at the wide-open sky, the sagebrush plains, and the endless horizon. Harriet, meanwhile, was torn between relief that Lucy had come and fear of what Caldwell's reaction might be. Would he feel insulted, or would he be open to Lucy as a prospective wife? When they arrived at the ranch house, Caldwell stood on the porch, his broad figure outlined by the midday sun. Harriet introduced Lucy formally, explaining that her sister wished to see the ranch. Caldwell greeted Lucy politely, but regarded Harriet with a quizzical expression. Sensing his discomfort, Harriet pulled him aside. "I should have prepared you for this," she murmured. "Lucy suggested that if I can't marry you, perhaps she might." Caldwell's eyes widened in shock. He looked from Harriet to Lucy, processing this bold proposition. For a moment, Harriet feared he would explode in anger or dismiss the idea as absurd. Instead, he spoke in a low, uncertain tone. "I didn't expect this, Harriet. You turned me down because you said you couldn't see a future with me. Yet you bring your sister as what my next option." Tears gathered in Harriet's eyes. "It's not like that, Caldwell. Lucy is genuine. She's braver than me. She wants to see if there could be something between you two. I wouldn't have agreed if I thought she was just throwing herself at you for money." Caldwell sighed heavily, removing his hat to rub his forehead. "This is highly unusual," he muttered. Then his gaze drifted back to Lucy. She was standing near the porch railing, admiring the sweeping pastures, an unguarded smile brightening her face. For a moment, Caldwell's expression softened. He nodded slowly, as if deciding something internally. "All right. She can stay see the ranch. If she's serious, we'll talk. But Harriet, I can't promise anything. My heart's still stung by your rejection." Harriet lowered her gaze, guilt and relief warring in her chest. That evening, Lucy settled into the guest bedroom Harriet had been occupying, while Harriet moved to a small spare room in the ranch house. Over supper, Lucy charmed the ranch hands with her quick wit and willingness to try their hearty cuisine. Caldwell observed her with a bemused smile. Harriet felt like an outsider, watching the beginnings of a connection she had spurned. A whisper of jealousy flitted through her. Why did Lucy seem so at ease here, so ready to adapt? As the days passed, Lucy and Caldwell grew closer. They took walks along the river, discussing ranch operations and the challenges of frontier life. Lucy asked 1,000 questions, and Caldwell answered with humor and patience. Harriet watched from the sidelines, heart heavy with conflicting emotions, relief for her family's prospects, regret for what might have been, and confusion about her own lingering feelings. One afternoon, Harriet was rummaging through the library room in the ranch house, searching for a ledger Caldwell had requested, when she discovered a locked drawer in the ornate writing desk. The ring of keys was next to it, innocently placed as if inviting her curiosity. Feeling a twinge of guilt, Harriet tried several keys until she heard a click. The drawer slid open, revealing a stack of letters sealed with wax. She froze. The top letter bore the name Ophelia Farnsworth. Harriet recognized the name. It was rumored Caldwell had been engaged before some years ago, but the engagement never reached fruition. Harriet's breath caught. Why was this letter locked away? Did it contain a secret that might jeopardize Lucy's future? With trembling fingers, Harriet carefully opened the letter. It was dated 3 years prior, from a woman who professed her love for Caldwell, but warned him about dangerous men in Cheyenne who sought to ruin him if he didn't submit to certain demands. Harriet's eyes widened. The letter referenced a blackmail scheme connected to the purchase of the ranch's mineral rights. It ended abruptly, I fear, for both our lives. If you do not yield, they may come after you with violence, or worse. Harriet felt her stomach twist. Did Caldwell carry this burden in silence? Had these threats shaped his decision to seek a mail-order bride from afar, hoping to find a companion untouched by local entanglements? She replaced the letter carefully, heart pounding. This revelation meant Caldwell had a hidden vulnerability. Could Lucy be in danger by attaching herself to him? That night, Harriet could hardly sleep. She stared at the moonlit ceiling, thinking of Lucy's blossoming connection with Caldwell and the spectre of a threat lurking in the shadows. She had rejected Caldwell once. What if Lucy's well-meaning attempt to marry him placed her in a perilous situation neither sister had imagined? While Lucy's presence seemed to brighten the ranch atmosphere, Harriet noticed Caldwell wore a tension in his shoulders, glancing over his land as though expecting an intrusion at any moment. His ranch foreman, Bartholomew O'Connell, whispered to Harriet that Caldwell had once had a fierce rivalry with a neighboring landowner named Zebediah Greeley. According to O'Connell, Greeley had tried to buy up mineral claims around Caldwell's property and was furious when Caldwell refused to sell. "Greeley's not a man to back down," O'Connell warned. Meanwhile, Harriet wrestled with the moral question of whether to warn Lucy about the blackmail letter. But how could she explain having read Caldwell's private correspondence without incurring his wrath? Torn by guilt and fear, Harriet decided to stay vigilant, hoping to glean more information from Caldwell or O'Connell. Lucy, blissfully unaware of Harriet's discoveries, spent increasing amounts of time riding with Caldwell across the ranch. She had never been so free-spirited back in Philadelphia. But here in Wyoming, Lucy found her courage. She even learned to fire a revolver under Caldwell's tutelage, a practical skill for the frontier. Harriet watched them from a distance, noticing how Caldwell's stern features would soften when Lucy teased him how Lucy's face glowed with excitement at the wild beauty around them. It wasn't long before Lucy's heartfelt nature began drawing Caldwell out of his guarded shell. One afternoon, Harriet found Lucy in the garden, flushed with excitement. "He asked me if I'd consider staying on." Lucy gushed potentially for good. Harriet's heart clenched. She managed a shaky smile. "That's wonderful, Lucy. I'm happy for you." Inside, though, Harriet felt a pang of regret. Perhaps Caldwell was indeed lovable if approached with an open mind. Why hadn't Harriet been able to see it? That evening, Harriet sat on the back porch after supper, the setting sun painting the horizon in swathes of crimson and gold. She heard footsteps and turned to see Caldwell approaching. He cleared his throat awkwardly. "Mind if I join you?" Harriet shook her head. They sat in silence for a moment, listening to the crickets. "I don't want you to feel out of place," Caldwell said softly. "I know Lucy and I have been spending time together." He paused, fiddling with the brim of his hat. "Are you okay with this? I don't want any bad blood between the two of you." Harriet forced a calm expression. "I admit it's strange, but Lucy believes you might be the one for her. And you seem to get along so well. I have no right to stand in the way." Caldwell nodded solemnly. "I care for your sister Harriet. She has a warmth that, well, it's different from what I've known. I never meant to hurt you. She raised a hand. "No, Caldwell. I hurt you first by rejecting your proposal so abruptly. Perhaps Lucy is exactly what you need, and you're what she needs." A hint of sadness underlined her words. Caldwell reached out, gently touching her shoulder. "Thank you for saying that." Just then a distant commotion broke the moment. A ranch hand came running. "Mr. Beaumont riders on the south boundary near the old Greeley line fence. They look armed." Caldwell swore under his breath, jumping up. Harriet felt a jolt of fear. They gathered the foreman and a few ranch hands, then rode out to the boundary line. Sure enough, they found men in dark hats near the fence, pulling up the posts. One tall figure stepped forward. Zebediah Greeley, a hawk-nosed man with a sneer. He hissed, "You're trespassing. Trespassing on the rightful land, Beaumont. You best surrender those mineral claims." Caldwell refused. "This is my property, Greeley. You have no right here." Greeley's men brandished rifles, a silent threat. Harriet watched from behind, heart hammering. She remembered the letter from Ophelia Farnsworth about blackmail and violence. Was this how it all began? For a tense moment it seemed there would be bloodshed. Then Greeley's lip curled, and he spat on the ground. "We'll be back," he growled. "Don't you worry." With that, he and his men rode off, leaving Caldwell and his men to fix the damaged fence. Harriet's hand shook as she clutched the reins of her horse. She caught Caldwell's eye, seeing the tight line of his jaw. This was bigger than a rivalry. It was a threat to Caldwell's life and property. Harriet realized Lucy's future might also be endangered if she married him. That night, Harriet wrote another letter this time, to a contact in Philadelphia, Addison Pratt, an old friend of her father's, who once served as a lawman in the West. Harriet explained the situation, hoping to glean advice on how to protect Caldwell and Lucy from Greeley's intimidation. She prayed that Addison's experience with men like Greeley could help them navigate the dangerous waters swirling around Circle B Ranch. Despite the brewing tension on the ranch's borders, Lucy and Caldwell continued to grow close. Their courtship was a curious affair, influenced by frontier hazards and the threat of a hostile neighbor. Yet Lucy's optimism seemed unwavering. She claimed Caldwell's heart was genuine gold, and she found his warmth and generosity a comfort. One late afternoon, as Harriet tidied up the ranch house's parlor, Lucy burst through the door, face aglow. He proposed she squealed, holding up her left hand. On her ring finger gleamed a modest but lovely band adorned with a small emerald. Harriet's breath hitched. She forced a wide smile. "Congratulations. That's wonderful news, Lucy." Inside, she braced herself for the swirl of mixed emotions. Relief for her family's security, jealousy that Lucy had won the affection Harriet had rejected, and fear that Lucy might be walking into dangerous territory with Greeley. That evening, Caldwell hosted a small celebratory supper for the ranch hands. Lucy was the radiant star of the gathering, but Harriet could not help noticing Caldwell glance her way, at times a trace of sadness in his eyes. She knew there might always be a complicated undercurrent between them, she who came out west to be his bride, but declined him, and Lucy, who took her place. After supper, Lucy pulled Harriet aside, her tone confidential. "Harriet, I know this has been difficult. I want you to be honest. Are you upset that I'm marrying Caldwell? Should I have stayed out of it?" Harriet's gaze fell. "I'd be lying if I said I don't feel conflicted," she confessed, tears gathering in her eyes. "But I truly want you to be happy. He's a good man, Lucy. I realize that now. You have my blessing, though I wish the circumstances were simpler." Lucy hugged her fiercely. "Thank you, Harriet." Then her voice dropped. "Tell me, is there something troubling you? You seem worried as though you're expecting disaster. If we marry, I need to know if there's something I should be aware of." Harriet froze. Should she reveal the letter from Ophelia Farnsworth? The blackmail hints the risk from Zebediah Greeley. She hesitated, then decided to share part of her concern. Greeley and Caldwell have a bitter dispute over land and minerals. You need to be prepared for the possibility that Greeley might escalate things. If you're going to be Caldwell's wife, be vigilant. Lucy studied Harriet's face, then nodded. "I'll be careful." Days later, a response arrived from Addison Pratt. Harriet read his letter in secret. My dear Harriet, these men who threaten Caldwell, particularly a man like Zebediah Greeley, are often bullies who rely on intimidation, but they can be truly dangerous. If Greeley is blackmailing Caldwell with false land claims, you should gather all Caldwell's legal documents, deeds, and communications that prove rightful ownership. Keep them safe. If it comes to violence, Cheyenne has a new sheriff, a man named Wyatt Earp, who has a reputation from his days in Dodge City. He may be able to help enforce the law, but be cautious. Frontier justice can be fickle. Protect your sister above all. Yours, Addison Pratt. Harriet felt some reassurance. Wyatt Earp's name was known even in Philadelphia. Stories of his law-keeping preceded him. If things escalated, Harriet might ride to Cheyenne and seek his help. But for the moment, Harriet kept Addison's advice to herself, determined to protect Lucy, while not overshadowing her wedding plans with fear. As Lucy and Caldwell moved forward with wedding arrangements, planning a simple ceremony, in 2 weeks, once the traveling preacher would pass by, the tension on the ranch grew palpable. Ranch hands were jumpy, often spotting unfamiliar riders on the horizon. Harriet assisted Lucy in selecting flowers from the small greenhouse Caldwell had built. She tried to focus on the sweetness of Lucy's excitement, even as an undercurrent of dread simmered. Then 3 days before the ceremony, calamity struck. At dawn, Harriet was awakened by frantic knocking on her door. Fire, someone shouted. Harriet threw on her robe and rushed outside. Flames danced along the southern fence, threatening the main cattle pen. The ranch hands were scrambling with buckets, fighting to contain the blaze before it spread to the barn, or heaven forbid the house. Harriet's throat constricted. If this was Greeley's doing, he was escalating his campaign of terror. Caldwell and Lucy emerged, throwing themselves into the firefighting effort. Harriet grabbed a bucket, helping form a line to pass water from the well. Sparks flew, ash stung her eyes, and her arms ached, but her sense of urgency drove her on. After hours of battling, they finally doused the flames, leaving charred timbers and smoldering grass in a blackened swath. They lost only a few fence lines, but the message was clear. Greeley or his henchmen were striking just before Caldwell's wedding, rattling his nerves and threatening the ranch's safety. As Harriet washed the soot from her face, she caught sight of Caldwell's furious gaze. He looked heartbreakingly weary and determined. Lucy stood by him, her face pale but resolute. Harriet realized Lucy might not abandon this man or this ranch, even in the face of violence. And Harriet, having brought Lucy here, felt a wave of responsibility for her sister's fate. Tensions ran high as the wedding day approached. Lucy tried to remain positive, insisting that evil men should not be allowed to ruin their joy. Caldwell hired extra guards, armed the ranch hands, and arranged for a local judge to come if the traveling preacher didn't arrive on schedule. He wanted Lucy safe, but he also refused to postpone the nuptials. On the morning of the wedding, Harriet helped Lucy into a simple white gown. Lucy had woven small wildflowers into her hair, giving her a sweet rustic appearance. "You look beautiful," Harriet said, softly, tears brimming. Lucy squeezed her hand. "Thank you for everything, Harriet. I know this has been an odd journey, but I'm so grateful to have you here." Caldwell waited on the back porch, dressed in his best suit, his round figure filling the vest snugly. Harriet couldn't deny he looked dapper, and there was a glow in his eyes when Lucy emerged. Bartholomew O'Connell played fiddle, and the ranch hands stood in respectful silence, hats in hand. Only the preacher was missing, delayed by a broken wagon wheel, as rumor had it. They decided to start with the exchange of vows, planning to sign the official documents once the preacher arrived. Lucy and Caldwell stood facing each other in the warm morning light. Harriet felt her heart clench with both joy and regret. Lucy spoke her vows, voice clear and unwavering. Caldwell's tone was thick with emotion as he promised to honor and cherish Lucy. Harriet blinked back tears, the scene a bittersweet testament that love could bloom unexpectedly. They slipped the rings onto each other's fingers. Lucy's was the emerald ring Caldwell had given her, and Caldwell's was a plain gold band Lucy had purchased in town. The small gathering applauded quietly, the ranch hands smiling. Harriet couldn't help but feel a surge of protectiveness. She silently vowed to do everything in her power to shield Lucy from any threat Greeley posed. Suddenly, a commotion erupted at the ranch gate. Harriet's pulse lurched. Zebediah Greeley appeared with a handful of riders approaching on horseback, ignoring the posted signs that the ranch was private property. Caldwell's ranch hands scrambled to confront them. Greeley dismounted, pushing past the gate, his expression predatory. "Congratulations on your wedding, Beaumont," he sneered. "Too bad it won't last." Lucy's eyes widened in fear. Caldwell stepped forward. Fists clenched his voice like rolling thunder. "You get off my land, Greeley, or I'll have my men escort you personally. This is my wedding day. Haven't you caused enough trouble?" Greeley's lips curled into a dark grin. "I'm just here to deliver a message. That land you claim is rightfully mine, and no piece of paper changes that. If you don't back off, I'll tear this place down." Harriet wanted to scream for help, to call for the law, but the local sheriff was miles away. In desperation, she remembered Addison Pratt's advice about Wyatt Earp in Cheyenne. If Greeley wouldn't stop, maybe they needed Earp's official intervention. However, before Harriet could act, Caldwell took a decisive step toward Greeley. "You come near my home or my wife again, and you'll answer to me," he warned, voice low and deadly. Greeley only laughed, turning to Lucy. "You sure you want to hitch yourself to this big lump of lard? He's on borrowed time." Lucy's face flared with indignation. "Get away!" she snarled, surprising Harriet with her ferocity. The ranch hands' rifles at the ready took positions around the yard. Greeley surveyed them, a mocking smile twisting his features. "All right, Beaumont, you have your little celebration, but I'll be back when you least expect." With that, he mounted his horse and rode off his men, trailing behind. A tense hush fell over the ranch. Caldwell took Lucy in his arms, his face drawn with worry and anger. "I'm sorry," he murmured. "I didn't want this to mar our wedding." Lucy shook her head. "I chose this life, and you. I won't run." Harriet swallowed. The wedding vows had been exchanged, but Greeley's threat loomed like a storm cloud. If Caldwell and Lucy intended to remain at Circle B Ranch, they needed a strategy, and Harriet had an inkling that the next step might involve summoning a lawman with enough reputation to stand up to the likes of Zebediah Greeley. That night, a subdued celebration continued indoors. The ranch hands tried to be merry, playing fiddle tunes, raising toasts to the newlyweds. Lucy sat close to Caldwell, leaning into him for comfort. Harriet forced herself to join in the festivities, though her thoughts remained on Greeley's brazen threat. When Harriet finally slipped outside for fresh air, she found Caldwell leaning against a porch post, gazing out at the moonlit plains. He looked over as she approached. "I couldn't rest," Harriet admitted. "There's too much on my mind." Caldwell nodded. "Me too." A moment of silence stretched between them. At last, Harriet mustered the courage to speak. "I know about the threats, probably more than you realize." She swallowed hard. Caldwell. I found a letter from Ophelia Farnsworth in your desk. She warned you of blackmail. Please forgive me for reading it, but I needed to understand. Greeley won't stop until he forces you off this land or destroys you. Caldwell's shoulders tensed. You read Ophelia's letter. He pressed his lips together, an old pain flickering in his gaze. She was a woman I once cared about. Greeley's men threatened her family if I didn't give up my mineral rights. It's true. Greeley will stop at nothing. But I won't yield. Harriet took a trembling breath. Lucy is in danger. You both are. Perhaps we should bring in Wyatt Earp from Cheyenne, get the law to intervene. Caldwell exhaled, eyes scanning the dark horizon. That might be our only chance, legal protection, a marshal or sheriff who can handle men like Greeley. I tried to handle it alone, but maybe that was pride talking. Suddenly, Lucy appeared in the doorway, wearing a shawl over her shoulders. I overheard, she said, softly. Harriet Caldwell. If we need the law, let's get it. I won't live in fear. But Caldwell, you're not alone anymore. You have me, Harriet, and the entire ranch staff behind you. Caldwell's eyes glistened with tears he tried to hide. He pulled Lucy close, pressing his forehead to hers. I never expected to marry a woman so brave. Harriet swallowed back emotion at the tender sight. The next morning, Harriet made preparations to ride to Cheyenne. She penned a note to Wyatt Earp's office, requesting an urgent meeting, and entrusted it to the stage driver. If Earp agreed to come, they might have an ally. Lucy insisted Harriet take a small revolver for the journey just in case. Harriet refused at first, but Caldwell seconded Lucy's concern. Harriet accepted, albeit reluctantly. The stage rolled out at dawn. Harriet's heart pounding with nerves. The trip to Cheyenne took several hours. During the ride, Harriet replayed all the events that led here, her initial journey, her rejection of Caldwell Lucy's arrival, the wedding, and Greeley's malicious threats. She realized that despite the heartbreak and confusion, she loved her sister dearly and would do anything to keep her safe. Upon arriving in Cheyenne, Harriet's search for Wyatt Earp led her through dusty streets, passing rowdy saloons and shops. She found the sheriff's office near the edge of town. A tall, lean man with a mustache was outside, adjusting his horse's saddle. Harriet approached, nerves dancing in her stomach. "Excuse me, sir. Are you Wyatt Earp?" He turned, eyes sharp. "That's me." "What can I do for you, Miss Harriet?" introduced herself, explaining the dire situation at Circle B Ranch. She described Greeley's aggression and the suspicious nature of his land claims. Earp listened quietly, then asked pointed questions about timing evidence and Caldwell's legal deeds. Once Harriet finished, Earp nodded slowly. "I've heard talk of Greeley's strong-arm tactics. Suppose it's time to pay him a visit. But justice doesn't come free or easy. I'll gather what I need, a few men, a proper order from the judge. If you can wait 2 days, I'll ride out there with a small posse." Harriet felt a surge of relief. "Thank you, Marshal Earp. I'll wait as long as it takes." Earp gave a curt nod. "Stay in town for the night, or until we're ready to move. I don't want you traveling back alone. Greeley's men might be watching." Harriet hesitated, but Earp's logic was sound. She found lodging at a modest boarding house, heart heavy, but hopeful. If this plan succeeded, the law would finally stand against Greeley. But Harriet knew Greeley wouldn't yield without a fight. She feared a final confrontation loomed, and Lucy was caught in the middle. Late that night, Harriet lay awake in her cramped room at the boarding house. She pictured the ranch, Lucy's bright laugh, Caldwell's quiet strength, the wide fields so close to her heart now. She thought of her father and mother back in Philadelphia, longing to know if Harriet's journey was worthwhile. She prayed that soon all would be settled and Lucy could live in peace with her new husband. Yet Harriet couldn't help but wonder if fate had another twist in store. Wyatt Earp arrived with a small posse just 2 days after Harriet's plea. As they approached Circle B Ranch, the air was heavy with tension. Caldwell and Lucy met them with visible relief. "Thank you for coming," Caldwell said. "We're bracing for trouble." Earp nodded. "We'll keep watch. If Greeley shows his face, we'll be ready." That night, lanterns glowed across the ranch, and rifles were kept within reach. Harriet and Lucy stayed inside, hands trembling, as the ranch settled into uneasy silence. Around midnight, gunshots shattered the stillness. Harriet jumped from bed, rushing to the window. Muzzle flashes lit the southern fields. Earp and his men galloped into the fray, joined by Caldwell and a few ranch hands. "Stay down!" Harriet shouted, pulling Lucy away from the window. The gunfight erupted with chaos, yells, hoofbeats, and steel cracking through night air. Then silence. Minutes later, figures emerged in the lantern light. It was Earp and Caldwell alive, but bloodied from the skirmish. Behind them, several men in cuffs. "Greeley wasn't with them," Caldwell growled. "He sent his men like cowards." Just then a lone rider appeared from the shadows. Harriet's breath caught Zebediah Greeley. "I own this land," he shouted, rifle raised. Before anyone could respond, he fired. The shot narrowly missed Caldwell, striking the barn wall. Harriet screamed. Earp spun and returned fire, but Greeley was fast ducking behind his rearing horse. A second shot rang out from the porch. Lucy stood there, revolver trembling in her grip. Her bullet clipped the ground near Greeley, just enough to startle him. He spun toward her, giving Earp the moment he needed. One clean shot sent Greeley tumbling from his saddle, wounded and howling. The posse disarmed him. Greeley writhed on the ground, cursing as Earp snapped irons around his wrists. "He'll stand trial now," Earp said grimly. Caldwell rushed to Lucy, pulling her into his arms. "You saved my life," he whispered. Harriet stood frozen, overwhelmed. Her sister, once the delicate, carefree girl, had just stood her ground against a tyrant. Harriet exhaled a shaky breath. The nightmare was over. As dawn broke, the last embers of the confrontation faded into smoke. Greeley's men would be prosecuted, his grip on the territory broken. And in that hard-earned sunrise, surrounded by dust and gunpowder, Harriet knew they had won more than just a battle. They had reclaimed peace, love, and a future. The days following Greeley's capture brought long-awaited calm to Circle B Ranch. With charges of arson, attempted murder, and fraud, he was bound for trial and hard labor. Wyatt Earp's testimony sealed his fate. Lucy and Caldwell, though shaken, found new strength in each other. Their bond, tested by fire and fear, had only deepened. The ranch hands praised Lucy's courage, and even Bartholomew O'Connell tipped his hat with admiration. Harriet watched it all with bittersweet pride. Her sister had grown into a fierce, resilient woman, someone the Wild West had shaped but never broken. Harriet, meanwhile, felt the call of home. Her journey west had begun with uncertainty, and now, with Lucy secure and the ranch safe, it was time to return. One afternoon on the porch, Lucy asked gently, "Are you really going?" Harriet nodded. "This life isn't mine, Lucy, but I'll always carry it with me." Caldwell joined them, offering Harriet a heartfelt goodbye and a generous bank draft to repay her family's debts. "Your folks are kin now," he said, simply. "I won't let them suffer." The next morning, Harriet departed. The ranch hands gathered to see her off. She embraced Lucy and Caldwell one last time, emotions too big for words. As the stagecoach rolled away, Harriet glanced back. Her sister stood arm in arm with the man she'd come to love, framed by a land that had tested them all. Harriet smiled through tears, knowing her role in this story had mattered. She had come west as a mail-order bride. She left not with a ring, but with something greater, a family healed, a sister fulfilled, and her own heart finally at peace. Months passed, and Harriet's return to Philadelphia brought a peace she hadn't expected. With Caldwell's generous bank draft, her family paid off their debts. Her father's health improved, and the threat of losing their home vanished. Though she left Wyoming behind, the memories traveled with her, etched into her spirit, like the horizon she once feared and then learned to admire. Letters from Lucy arrived weekly, full of warmth. She wrote of quiet evenings with Caldwell, of planning orchard expansions, and of Wyatt Earp bringing Greeley to justice. The fear that once loomed over Circle B Ranch had lifted, replaced by joy and purpose. Harriet found new footing as a teacher, discovering a passion for helping children learn. Though her path hadn't ended in a frontier marriage, it gave her a new beginning just the same. One crisp evening, Harriet penned a letter to Lucy. "Dearest Lucy, how strange and beautiful life is. You, a rancher's wife, glowing in a place I once feared. Me, finding peace in a city I once longed to flee. I can still feel the western wind at times, and I miss your laugh echoing in the ranch house. But here I've found my rhythm. Write soon, with news of a niece or nephew. All my love, Harriet." Sealing it, she smiled, grateful for a journey that, while unexpected, had carved a place for both sisters in a story of resilience, love, and redemption. Thank you for joining us on this journey through heartache and hope, betrayal, and bravery, where the vast frontier tested one sister's resolve and granted another a lifetime of love. We've seen how destiny can shift in a single choice, and how courage rises when family ties are on the line. If you were moved by Harriet's dilemma, Lucy's boldness, and Caldwell's unwavering spirit, please show your support. Like this video if you believe in the power of redemption. Share it with friends who crave a sweeping Wild West drama, and subscribe to our channel for more riveting tales of romance and adventure. Your engagement helps us continue bringing stories that kindle the imagination and remind us that no matter how rugged the road, hope can flourish under the widest of skies. Join us again soon for another tale that celebrates resilience and the unbreakable bonds that guide us home.